Folks, welcome to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. It's my honor today to have on the program Bay Area drummer Bill Vitt. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, where did you grow up in high school?
Sacramento.
You were up in cow country up there.
In cow country. Is that what you said, cow country?
Cow country, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you could. Some people call it that. But yeah, I went to high school there and then moved to Marin County.
So in high school, did you originally start off playing drums, or did you play other instruments as well?
I started playing piano when I was about 5. My father was a jazz musician, and so he started me on piano when I was really young, and picked up the drums when I was about a sophomore in high school.
When you say he was a jazz musician, was he just a local guy playing acts in town, or did he actually go on? Was he with people? Did he go out on the road?
When he was young, he went out with a couple of people, and then myself and 2 brothers. So once he got settled in the family thing, he played locally. He played at this big nightclub. This is back kind of in the end of the big band days, and he had a big band, and they had this gig for a long time. I think he played 5 or 6 nights a week. But it was the old style, the big dinner club with a big band and all that kind of stuff. But he continued to play, right up until he passed away a few years ago. He was always active.
And he gave you a not only an appreciation for music, but like an understanding, a discipline to the craft, the amount of work that you had to put into it?
Yeah, and he also told me, whatever you do, don't be a musician.
You listened to that real well.
So that maybe he really meant, knowing that I would not do anything he told me to do, that maybe he wanted me to be a musician. I don't know.
Did you, so when you started playing drums, when did you actually transition over to start, when did you get your first first kit?
I traded a 49 Chevy for a set of drums, and I think I was a sophomore in high school.
Oh, that's great.
And then started immediately playing gigs.
And what do you, what kind of, were you guys, was it the experimentative kind of stuff, or were you just playing standards at that point, or what were you listening to at that time, and were you trying to emulate that?
Well, there were a couple different things. I actually played in a surf band when I first started, and Mike Clark, the drummer that lives in New York right now, who's a famous drummer in New York.
Yeah, no, I just interviewed Mike.
You're kidding?
No, we were doing a 3-part series. That guy's classic. No, it's so funny you brought him up.
Yeah, and in fact, we were buddies in Sacramento.
Oh, that's great.
He took my place, and the band was called the Del Counts, and then he took my place in that band, and I moved to L.A. for 3 years in pursuit of being a studio musician, that's what I did when I was down there. Did sessions and rarely played a gig. Just worked, in the studios. But, yeah, and also, I'd get gigs playing, with trio standards and mostly R&B bands. Like the steady gig 6 nights a week or so we'd get when Sacramento had all the... Sacramento used to have a lot of nightclubs with live music 7 nights a week, and, they were packed, and so there were a lot of gigs, and most of those were more of the R&B kind of deal.
Like real rhythm and blues, though, not like sweet soul. We were just talking about like blues.
Yeah, I mean the really funky soul, the type of blues, Motown kind of stuff, and a lot of Ray Charles and James Brown, that sort of thing.
Oh, really? So those guys? I was going to ask you, did it have something to do with the idea, like they wanted to have a real vibrant night scene because of the politicians up there? Why was it such a vibrant? I don't think of Sacramento now. I haven't been there, but for you to say that, I'm just wondering why it was like that.
Well, I don't know. I don't think there was any correlation with the politics. That's the capital and that little scene's downtown, and most of the clubs very active nightclubs, the Tropicana, and I forget the other ones, but they had really top-notch. Back in the day, that before the concert thing really got going, the big outdoor shows. There were a lot of bands that were on the road all the time, like the Green Men that Howard Wales was in for a long time, and I was in a band called the Rogues, and blah, blah, blah. But, a musician would usually play one of those bands, and there was a circuit. So you're on the road all the time. You'd play 6 weeks in Honolulu and 6 weeks wherever, and just keep moving around. But, at the time, that was, the clubs in Sacramento were, they were packed. I mean, 7 nights a week, and you could just run around town and hear, 10 different bands, really good bands. So, that was, that actually went all the way up until, I think, when MAD kind of, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, when that whole thing started, that kind of, most of those nightclubs collapsed because they just couldn't draw as many people to support having, really good musicians. But, Sacramento was a very, very hot place. I mean, a musician could work 7 nights a week easy and make good bucks playing in nightclubs.
I really, actually, it's so classic. You bring that up. I'm not gonna. You got to tell me about when did you first meet Mike Clark? Or I
met him in Sacramento, and he was just kind of starting out, kind of like me. And there was another guy named Ned Eldridge, who was a guitar player, that led the band, the Del Counts, that we were both in. And anyway, I think Ned lives in Katati now. But anyway, he was a real good guitar player. And and then Mike said one day, he said, I'm going to move to New York and play jazz, and that's exactly what he did. And after a few years, when he got the gig with Herbie Hancock, that set him off. So, but, back then, there was a lot of gigs. I mean, I made a living. I was married and was full-time student. I made a living just playing nightclubs at night. There was just so much going on,
It's like when you would go to, if you would go to Honolulu for 6 weeks at a time, would you be playing the same sets every night? How would you change it up, or were you essentially just playing a very standard set?
Pretty much standard, R&B stuff. For example, I think the first time I went on the road, the first gig was in Honolulu, an enormous nightclub, and 6 weeks there. Then we went to Reno for 6 weeks. We played at the Hilton, San Francisco Airport. Just always moving along. We played in Las Vegas a few times at the Fremont Hotel, and there was another club called the Warehouse that we played at in Las Vegas. And in fact, Sly Stone was playing right across the street before they got their record deal. So, back then the bands were still nightclub-style bands, just kind of moving around. And, you had an agent, and they always kept us booked, If we wanted to play 7 nights, that wasn't a problem. If you had a good band. And, back then the bands were pretty much R&B oriented. A lot of them had a couple of horns and once in a while percussionists. And most of the bands had, a B3 player. The Hammond organ was a big deal back then. But standard Motown soul kind of stuff. And so it wasn't, a solid agenda, so to speak. It was pretty much what the people wanted to hear. And, sometimes we'd have to play songs like Louie Louie, which was not much fun. But
no, I'm trying to get are we talking like early 60s, right? What time period are we in at this point?
This would be, let's see, probably from 60. Well, the nightclub thing in Sacramento, I started in about 63. And then I got a gig on the road, and I think I went out in about 64 or something like that.
Who did you get the gig with? Can I ask that?
The first gig I got was with a band called the Rogues, which was an R&B band.
How do you spell that?
I got a gig with a band called Jack Beatty and the Chessmen, and they were a real hot, Las Vegas, Nevada act. We played a lot of casino gigs, and but we also played other agendas. Also, we dance music, but they also did a show. It's like a show band. That's what they were called back then. So anyway, and they were very well established and very well known, and they had a very good agent that kept them booked on really good gigs all the time. And I stuck with them, I don't know, for a year and a half, and I just got tired of being on the road. And then I moved to LA for 3 years, and then moved back up here. And I immediately went to work with Michael Bloomfield when I moved back up north. And then
yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead, because it's
okay.
funny. Bill, I looked up I looked you up online, and it is like, I was just so excited to be able to talk about you and your career, because there really isn't a lot out there. I mean, they give some discographies, and I know that I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing now, but the truth is, it's like the early part of your career is somewhat shrouded. So I'm just trying to get an idea to set the table for it. Like in LA, Motown, correct me if I'm wrong, but Motown had not moved from Detroit to Los Angeles when you were doing studio gigs down there at that point, had they?
They had I think what was it, 68, something like that, they moved down to LA, because I remember there were these two brothers called the Paris brothers that I did sessions for, and they told me that Motown was moving to LA, and it was really funny because I said, "Oh, that's great," and because I remember they said James Jameson is moving out here, and he's ended up living in a motel, and Motown really didn't help him out much. But I don't know whether this is true or not, but they told me that they had started a white section in Motown, and Pat Boone was the first one they signed.
No way.
That's what I thought. So I don't know whether that's rumor or it's true.
If that's true, that's a great. I wouldn't put it past them.
But that's what I was told. But yeah, and another guy that really, I'll tell you what, in LA back then, everybody warned me. They said there's a very tight knit clique of studio musicians down there, and it's just virtually impossible to get in. Being an outsider like myself, and I really lucked out. I was doing a lot of demo sessions for Don Costa, who did a lot of. In fact, he built a studio, and it was primarily for Frank Sinatra. They had a big room where they could actually, hold a whole symphony orchestra. It was really a neat studio.
Sure.
It was on, La Cienega, and. Anyway, I did a lot of sessions there, and one day, Eddie Gourmet walked into the control booth and said, "Oh, I want that drummer on my new album." So that was my first big break.
Wow.
I got to do an album with Eddie Gourmet, and I was pretty young. And so that kind of set things off. And then, I got a lot more work off that, and then I decided that I would rather live up here, and then I came up here in '68, I think it was. But
I was going to say when you moved back to the Bay Area, I was curious. You mentioned Michael Bloomfield, and I see. That's something I didn't even realize that you collaborated with him. But I was going to ask you, did you get a chance to play at places like Jimbo's Bop City and the Both And up there?
What was the name of the place? Bop City?
Jimbo's Bop City, like up in San Francisco. Yeah.
I don't remember playing there.
Right.
The name kind of rings a bell, but most of the places I played in the city were the Fillmore, the Winterland, Family Dog, those kind of places.
So when you moved up to San Francisco, were you sort of, it wasn't nearly as sort of, like you said, when you moved to Southern California, very tight-knit, studio musicians, hard to break in. San Francisco, what was the scene, what were they telling you about it, and why did you gravitate to go back there?
Because I like it up here a lot better, and I just like the vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back up here, the hippie thing had just hit full tilt. And, LA's just different, and so when I came back up here, in fact, after the Bloomfield band, I got into the Sons of Chaplin, which had changed their name to Yogi Flem at the time, and it was just totally different. I'll give you a real quick example. I did a lot of studio work in the Bay Area when I got up here also, and in LA, when you go into a studio, it was pretty much mandatory that you do, I think it was 2 songs in 3 hours, and you'd fill out a tax form, and most of the stuff, the master sessions in LA were charted, so you'd read the parts. And when I got to San Francisco, I think one of the first albums I played on, it took us a year to do the album, and it was on Columbia Records.
It took a year.
Totally
it took a year.
Vibe,
that you could not. You just basically encapsulated the difference between the two, the Bay Area and Southern California, right there.
Yeah, and I decided I liked the laid-back style a lot better. I just stayed here. I actually tried to move back to L.A. I went down for 3 months a few years later and decided again that, it's not for me. Although I'm going down there in a few weeks to do a new CD because I do have a good recording setup down there. So
I wanted to, because I've interviewed a ton. Most of the jazz guys that I have interviewed, guys like Calvin Keyes and other Jerry Hahn, guys like that, they all talked about the Fillmore District. Having these sort of all night, they'd play all night jam sessions, and then they wouldn't be able to serve liquor from like 2 to 6 in the morning. And then it would reopen at 6 a.m. with these organ trios, Richard Groove Holmes and Merle Saunders. And I just was wondering if you ever had a chance to sit in those sessions or even go in and check out that. Because it just seemed like music was playing all the time and it was just always going on.
Yeah, it's like, I remember, now you brought that up, Minnie's Can Do Club, and and of course the Both Ann was around then. But my experience with that was mostly when I was in Sacramento. I played. There was a place called Dave's Soul Kitchen, and it was also called the Off Broadway, and it was in Oak Park. And when they had the race riots and all that, that was right in the center of that. And I played there on and off for many, many years. And I would get off one gig at 2 in the morning and run over there. And I think I was the only white guy in any of the bands. And so anyway, started organ trio. There was a B3.
Who were you playing with? Can I ask you who you were playing with?
The people that were the house band, Soul Dave was the organ player. I don't think you'd know these people.
Right.
They were really good. That's where I really learned how to play jazz and, really got into it. But it started with a trio, organ trio, and then the place would be packed by 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, that's awesome.
Packed with people coming off gigs and people that were coming through town that sat in, and it was really good experience for me. And then I'd get off that gig at 8 in the morning and, wander out the front door, and there were people going to church. It was really weird.
You going for the early session at church?
No, I went home and went to bed.
Yeah, right.
I had all the energy. I could do that. I could play a 5-hour gig and then go play all night at Dave's Soul Kitchen. But that's where I really learned how to play. I mean, there's no doctor's degree or anything like that to match my experience at that place.
Can you?
And I actually went through there about 20 years ago, and sure enough, it was still open. And I went in, sat in, and then I don't know if it's open anymore. I haven't been there for a long time, but that was kind of where I really learned how to play.
When you I just
it was like you had to play.
That's what I'm saying. I wanted you to articulate it from a musician's point of view. When you say I really learned how to play, it meant that you were up on the bandstand and you had to, if you had someone to say, you better say it, right?
Yeah. And being the only white guy, that was extra pressure, But once I got into it, and worked out. It was just great. I always look forward to going to that gig because the music was so soulful, you know, and it was just really cool. And there was a club in L.A. too when I lived in L.A. called the Parisian Room, and I'm trying to remember the street that was on. But anyway, it's a famous after-hours place, and you know, all black club that had Monday night jam sessions, and I'd go down there and sit in. And the first time I sat in, they wanted to get me off the stage immediately, and so they played a tune that was like super up tempo, you know, and
man.
that would they thought, well, after about 4 bars of that, he'll just leave.
Right.
But luckily, I made it through, and I made the grade. So that was a cool place to go jam, also.
So you this is great. We're talking to Bill Vitt, Bay Area drummer, and it's just a pleasure to be with you today. I just wanted to, so you get to the Bay Area, and you knew Michael Bloomfield prior to that. How did you wind up with him?
I had a girlfriend who was a musician that was in a band called the Ace of Cups.
Okay.
That were a hot band back then. And she introduced me to Michael, and she said he was looking for a drummer, and I auditioned, and John Kahn was in the band. And John and I, you know, you probably know, after that, we did a lot of studio work together and played in a lot of bands together. We just played very well together. And so we did a lot of gigs together, and that was the start of our, you know, bass drum thing that we did for many, many years. But
So wait, so John was playing with Michael Bloomfield, and you were brought into the band, and who else was in? Was there a horn section as well, or no?
Some of the time, yeah. In fact, people like Noel Jukes and Ron Stallings and you know, people like that were usually the horn players. But what it was kind of the electric flag. When Buddy Miles left that band, that's
right.
when I came in.
Oh, okay.
So,
and Harvey Brooks was on bass.
Yeah, Harvey had left already when I joined the band, and then it changed names to Michael Bloomfield Band. But Nick Ravenitis was, you know, one of the main guys in the band. He did a lot of the writing, and you know, also produced other people that I played on records with, like Brewer and Shipley and Danny Cox, people like that, for Columbia Records. And Nick was a really good producer, and he's still around. I saw him a couple of years ago.
You know, it's so funny. I was just listening to this album, and Danny Cox, there's a picture of him on a beach with a horse, and you're drumming on that album.
That's the album I played on, right?
What a great album, and John's on bass. I think Jerry plays on that too, actually.
Yeah, there were a lot of people on that album, actually.
So when you and John first, this is so important for musical history, Bill. I mean, as best you can, was it when you and John? I know John loved James Jamerson and Chuck Rainey, and he himself was a peer group with those guys.
Yeah.
But when you first started collaborating musically, was it an instant kind of chemistry? How did you guys get into such a good sync together?
We just clicked, you know, right off. And we had the same interests, you know, we were both, you know, like you say, James Jamerson was his guy, and I loved James Jamerson, and we just had very common interests. We both lived in Forest Knolls at the time, in Marin, so we went, you know, we always rode to gigs and sessions together, and we became, you know, great friends, and blah, blah, blah. And actually, I got him into the Garcia band, to go back again, which a lot of people don't know this, but Howard Wales and I were kind of like a house band at the old Matrix on Fillmore, which I don't know, there was another Matrix in North Beach, but the original Matrix, and it was just a listening club. Nobody danced, and they had a built-in 4-track studio. And so we'd play with, you know, Freddie King, James Cotton, whoever came through, we'd back them up. And then we would play just organ and drums, you know, some of the nights. And then Jerry Garcia walked in one night and John Conn, and I got John Conn into the band, and then we had a quartet going, and it changed.
Well, no, the album, there was an album, Hooterole, obviously, but then there was also a release called Side Trips. Where
that's the Matrix. That was
exactly. Tony Saunders, when I interviewed him, he talked about there were these huge pillows on the floor, and he would just camp out and watch the music. So all that, it almost seems like it doesn't seem real, Bill. It doesn't seem like it even really happened.
It was a real psychedelic kind of place, and the really cool thing about it, it was, like I say, it was a listening club, so people would come in and listen. Santana, when Tower of Power first got together, all those people would come sit in. It was just a great meeting place for musicians to play, and the owners were really cool guys, and it was just a lot of fun. And of course, we recorded every night. We got a copy of whatever we played, and unfortunately I got ripped off. I had boxes of those tapes, and I rented out a house to somebody years ago. And when they moved out, I realized they'd run off my.
That really, I don't. You know what? That makes my blood boil. But I just don't want to turn the interview to a negative tone. That sucks.
Yeah.
That really sucks.
Yeah, I agree. But
how often? So, I mean, did you guys had like the Wales, Vitt drum, organ, and then eventually Jerry sat. Was Jerry just sitting in as a guest, or did you guys have a regular gig at the Matrix?
Well, first he sat in, and it's really loose. We never rehearsed. It was just kind of a jam band, and it'd be called the Wales Garcia Band, and then when Howard left, it'd be Saunders Garcia, and then I think it went to just Jerry Garcia Band. But I was in the band 4 years, and we never rehearsed. We just play off the wall, or
off
the back room before the gig. We say, "Oh, we've got a new Stevie Wonder tune. Let's try that tonight." They'd run through the changes, but it's real loose. And Martin Fierro and all the classic Bay Area musicians would sit in with us.
Did guys like Louis Gasca ever come in and play?
Yeah, I remember Louis coming in, and Armando Peraza played with us for a while. He was in the band, and Tom Fogerty, of course, he played with us a lot, and Cyril Falcher, who was a very good singer from Texas, and of course Martin played with us on and off a lot.
Yeah, he was a spectacular flautist and horn player as well. When you going back to Sacramento, when you said you learned how to play jazz, did you learn changes at that point?
Well, I studied piano, and I was actually a music major in college, so I had a pretty good background. And in fact, I still play keyboard a lot, and on my CDs, 90% of the parts I do in synthesizer. And I'll bring Tony Saunders in, or Phil Wood to do some horn parts or whatever, and whatever singer I use. But before you end our interview, I'd like to tell you about who's going to be on the next one. But
please do, yeah.
But that's pretty much. When I was in Sacramento, I literally played gigs every night, and then after hours a lot. So I was real busy. Did you,
looking back on it, you were essentially the first generation of the, whatever you want to call it, the first generation of Bay Area musician that sort of played off the wall, psychedelic rock with, but it was a mixture. There was heavy Latin influences with like the Louis Gasca and the Martin Fierro, and you had Cannonball Adderley. You also had Cal Jader, Armando Peraza, the sort of the Latin, the mambo in the West. You had all this fusing of music coming together at the same time, and I just was there a catalyst that spawned this, or would you just say here that it was just luck that you and John Conn wound up, and Michael Bloomfield and all these people wound up in the same place at the same time, and how do you account for all of it?
My daughter's been asking me that for years. What really happened back then?
What's that?
I tell her, I don't know. It just happened. kind of met at once in the same place. And
Bill, do me. I got to flip the tape here. Hold with me 1 second. I don't want to waste this. Okay, hold on.
all right.
Yeah. All right, Bill, take it away. I'm sorry about that interruption there.
No problem.
So you were talking about just sort of trying to explain this to your daughter for so many years, but can you do as best you can to try to explain that?
Well, I don't even know if I know myself, but I think, in my take on that whole thing, because, I lived in L.A. for 3 years, and when I came back up here, everything had changed. Everybody, there were all these great concerts going on, and all these people that dropped out and tuned in and all that kind of stuff, and it was just like this, it was like a great awakening or something, especially after experiencing the 50s, which was just dead, nothing going on, just boring. So anyway, it was just a revolution, that's the way I saw it, and it was great. Everybody was happy-go-lucky and having fun and lots of music, and I wish I would have had more time to get involved in the other parts, but I was, playing all the time, so I was busy and trying to make a living, so I was playing, probably 80% of the time. I didn't have time to get involved in demonstrations and things like that were really a part of that whole thing. So it was just a wonderful time, and I don't know, it's almost like it was a different lifetime, you know what I mean? It was just...
you should feel fortunate. The way you talk about the 50s being dead, it didn't strike me as sort of like in nowadays where in certain parts of the country, and especially in the media that we have, it's like this sort of, it's the end of the world. Everything is the end of the world. There's a crisis. But the 50s was more just sort of dull and boring, and it was your generation saying, no, we're bringing some serious energy we want to bring some life back into life.
Right.
That's different than now when there's just sort of this pervading pessimism that we really have. We have too many rocks in the satchel, and that we're sort of tilting backward, and we've kind of become unbalanced. It seemed to me there wasn't nearly the financial sort of gravity that went on. I mean, I listened back to when you guys, even the Garcia Saunders stuff, the legendary Keystone shows. You guys were up for doing 5-minute Space Jams, and then everything wasn't predicated on the dollar. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Right, yeah. No, it's true. It was just a whole different thing. Just a small example is the way bands, whether it was a Garcia band, any band that I played with a lot of bands back then, different bands, but there was no organization, but like, for example, if you were in L.A. in a band, it would be the leader would take a bigger cut, then you might have an agent, and it was more like a business thing, and up here it was different. It was just everybody split everything evenly, and even the equipment guys in some of the bands, we were like a little family, and it was just such a wonderful feeling, and there was a lot more trust, and there wasn't all this heavy stuff going on like there is today, and the middle class disappearing, which is back then, there was still a large middle class, and there were just, I don't know, it was just a safer, a better environment, and I don't know, it was just a wonderful time. I don't know what happened, but it stopped.
It stopped big, and there's a whole lot of, we could talk for days about that, but I did, what were some of the other bands in the Bay Area that you played with? And I think the question I had was like you said, the Fillmore and some of these guys, Bill Graham, other promoters in the area, they did from my eye, they did a very savvy job of putting maybe like a Sons of Champlin with like a Malo or a El Chicano, and then also like a Sly and the Family Stone, so it would be all on the same bill, and you would attract a black audience, a Chicano audience, and a white audience, and it would be done very set. Is that kind of were you on bills like that where there was a lot of mix?
Oh yeah, I mean, it could be Miles Davis and Quicksilver. You never knew. And I kind of liked that. I really did, because it kind of, especially if they had Miles at the Fillmore, so all of a sudden you've got all these jazz lovers, and of course Miles was always way ahead of everybody else. So every time you see Miles, he'd be a step ahead of everybody else, and he'd hire young musicians, and that was great, because then you'd have you might have Aretha Franklin or whoever, but it was a nice blend of all these different things, and I think that's what made it those venues really interesting. And Walter Hawkins Singers might be. We were on the bill with them once, and there's just this a lot of different things going on, a lot of color, and I really miss that, because it seems like these days they kind of try to match that kind of, if you got a New Orleans venue and you've got the Neville Brothers and the Radiators and the same kind of
exactly. No, it's all like, okay, if you like soul, then this is what you want to listen to. If you like rock, this is what you want to listen to. If you like rap, then this is what you want to. But it's not a mix. It's not a variation. So therefore, people are only hearing what they think they're supposed to be hearing, as opposed to what they really should be hearing.
You're right. I agree with that, and I think, like with Miles as an example, it really opened a lot of minds, because the hippie group that would come to hear Starship, and if somebody like Miles was on the same bill with him, all of a sudden they're exposed to Miles Davis, and they're going, wow, why didn't I get turned on to this guy before? Because they couldn't, because Bill Graham just had this really cool thing about putting the right things together and enlightening people on different kinds of music, which I have a lot of respect for.
Absolutely, and the more he seemed to be, as Miles was musically, Bill was ahead of his time as a producer, because that to me was, of course, he also had the talent out there as well. But like when you, how much of an influence, I guess. Let me see what am I really trying to focus on here? Yeah, that my question was this. What was your first interaction with the Fantasy Records label, the Saul Zaentz, and how is that how you met Fogerty? Or I was just wondering how you got involved with Fantasy Records.
Okay, the first fantasy experience I had was when I was still living in Sacramento and going to school there. I was playing with a trio called the Wayside Trio, and they had just won the state championship of folk singers. And so anyway, we had this really good gig at this big place in Sacramento, 3 nights a week, I think. And it was kind of like a big show. It was really a very cool gig. But anyway, we got an invitation to go to Fantasy Records in San Francisco when they were in San Francisco and record.
Wow.
And I'll never forget this, because it was kind of like this dark area of town. It was late at night, and it was like an old lumber yard. You had to climb over all this lumber, and then you get into this really funky building. And there was this guy named Max, and he was like a true beatnik. And this is back when beatniks were in, the pre.
Sure.
And Max was a real cool guy, And so he recorded us, and at the same time, there was a band in there recording called the Gollywogs, and that they became Creedence Clearwater. But it's really funny, because I probably met them because we were there at the same time, but I never made the correlation later until I met Tom Fogerty, and then we were talking about the old Fantasy, and then, oh my God, we were in the same building and forgot that we met, or it was just like I never made the connection. And so that was my first experience at Fantasy. And then when they built their studio in Berkeley, I did a lot of work there. And I was spent a lot. John Conn and I both were there a lot. Can
you talk a little bit about just being in that in that environment? It seems like it was one of I've talked to Bill Belmont, and I know that Bill didn't really get involved into the mid-'70s, but, I'm just so fascinated with the Fantasy, and there were other jazz labels like Verve and other labels that it was, to me, it seemed that the record, it was more, Fantasy was more concerned with what they would put out music that stood for their philosophy, that stood for what they believed in, as opposed to necessarily making money. I mean, they wanted to make money, but there was a real diverse, there was a real diverse sort of collection of music going on there, and you could really run into to any musicians just having a cup of coffee and say, hey, you want to come in and play on this record with me? I mean, that's kind of the way it seemed like it played out.
Yeah, well, I think their first big hit was Vince Guaraldi that actually got them on the map. And
with Bola Sette, or just the Cast Your Fate to the Wind stuff?
Cast Your Fate to the Wind, that made them some money, and then Creedence Clearwater, of course, just really set them off. So that gave them a lot more freedom to do all these different things, and I played on a cut Walter Hawkins singers. They had all kinds of different people. I met Cannibal Adderley in the control booth there one time, and he was doing some stuff with them, and all different kinds of things. But you're right, they had that was kind of the hip underground thing going on, and of course they had the Red Records. That was kind of cool. And then they bought up a bunch of other jazz labels, Riverside,
Milestone, yeah,
all those, and cataloged all those. And anyway, so they started doing a lot of really different things, and But I haven't been in that place for many, many years, so it's probably changed a lot. I don't know who's over there. I've talked to a couple of the producers over there, but
I for many fans of Garcia and Saunders' band, I mean, the idea that both those guys, and John Conn for that matter, they're no longer with us, and and I wanted to ask you a little bit about, if you could, about just the kind of people they were, and the kind of experience that you had with them playing in that band. The Keystone sessions, those things will, that's a legacy that'll go on forever. And whether you have the vinyl and you have that ridiculous classic gatefold cover where you open it up and everybody's sitting around having a good time, and the cops are there and everybody's laughing, or you have the CDs or whatever it is.
That was weird, that picture.
I actually, now I can go back and try to find you, and I know you're in there somewhere.
Oh, I'm sitting right next to Garcia.
Yeah, you're there. But talk about Jerry. I mean, talk about when you knew him, and maybe some things that things about Jerry that a lot of people maybe weren't aware of, that you knew him as a person. You could talk a little bit about.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was never, we came from different music kind of backgrounds and all that, which we just kind of ended up in a band together. But as a person, and I have a lot of respect for his playing. In fact, even more as I start listening to some of these old things that we did. But he was just a wonderful human being. He was very, very knowledgeable. He was very creative. He would, if we were mixing a record, he would be in the control room doodling or drawing little pictures, kind of like Zap comic kind of stuff. It was really cool stuff, And but he was just really, just to sit down and talk to the guy, he was just really cool, and real laid back, and he was very, very aware of what was going on politically, and just very well read in a sense, but more of a street sense kind of style, But I really liked the guy. He was just a sweetheart. And Merle Saunders, same thing, wonderful guy. And John Conn and I, we hung out all the time together, so I don't need to go into that. But anyway, I have a lot of respect for Garcia. He was just had really good vibes. You know what I mean, great sense of humor, and he was actually very funny. That's, he could bring you, if we're having a bad night, I'd get to the gig, and he would manage to liven me up by, with his humor. So anyway, that's my take on Jerry Garcia. He's a wonderful guy.
How did you, I'm looking at an album here on Fantasy. It's Merle Saunders' Fire Up, and there's a picture of you and Merle and Fogerty and John Kahn, Jerry Garcia, and you do all these great tunes, but there was a lot of overlap. It's interesting. You're not on drums on all the tracks. Some of the tracks have Billy Kreutzmann on them, and some of them have some other jazz players.
Gaylord Birch probably on that.
Gaylord Birch is on there, and there were also other guys. Michael Howe was a guitar player on there and that kind of stuff. But looking back on that, was it the most special time of your musical experience, or is there something that there was that topped that?
Something that topped that?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, was there anything was that the most fun you've ever had?
Well, yeah, that period of time, yeah. And the thing with me, I was super busy at the time. I was playing with about 4 different bands, and then, doing a lot of recording stuff. And when I started playing with Bill Chaplin, that was my priority. I loved that band. And so that, there were a lot of gigs that I missed because I was playing with the Sons, and I'd get Bill Kreutzmann or whoever to replace me with the Garcia band. And the Sons was kind of a thing that I was really into. We actually rehearsed and did all original songs, or mostly original songs, I should say. But anyway, it was kind of that was my main thing, and as long as I stayed with them.
So you were with Garcia Saunders. You were primarily, like, when you were in town and you could play at the local clubs, you'd play with them. But did you travel? Because I did a lot of research. I mean, you go to the Jerry site, it says Bill Vitt, drummer 71 to 74. But then you go dig a little bit deeper, and then you find that not all the shows you were on there because you were playing with Bill Chaplin. And
right.
So were you like if Garcia Saunders went on the road to the East Coast, did you make trips with them out there, or were you mainly the drummer for them?
You know what, I did go out with them a few times, but I didn't go to the East Coast with them, mostly because I had other obligations, and I really didn't want to leave then. You go out for a while, and then you don't want to go on the road anymore. You just want to stop that.
Yeah, you're tired. Exactly, you're exhausted.
Yeah, I got burnt out.
Yeah, right,
traveling.
right.
So I just avoided, if I could, and so I didn't play any of those East Coast gigs with them. I stayed local and, had plenty going on here. Because, I was on the road when I was young playing with those night, club bands. And, the only difference was those gigs would last, at least 2 weeks. 6 weeks, I actually played a gig in Portland for a whole summer once. But there's these other things. You're doing concerts, you're one city to another, like every day, and it's no fun.
Did you?
But you got to do it, especially if you got a record deal and you got to go up there and pay your dues,
Absolutely, no, and it speaks to the business mindset that you were referring to, the way it kind of pervaded that scene back then. But how much were you? I mean, it's so funny to look back. I mean, it must be even more bizarre for you, but how much input did you have that Fantasy was going to use? Like, why did they decide to choose that run of the Keystone, if you're even aware of it? And how much input did you have on what tracks wound up on those albums? Because you have Live at the Keystone Volumes 1 and 2, then this Keystone Encores came out. And I was just curious as to how much input you had and whether you got promo copies of those albums and whether you actually got paid dues for those albums.
Oh, yeah, no. The only thing I still get royalties on those.
Good, okay.
And, Yeah, oh yeah. And the only thing that I didn't participate in very much was later. I don't know. I don't like to sit in studios and mix and do that kind of stuff. So I avoided that. Merle, Jerry, and John Kahn were the guys that usually were in the studio mixing and deciding which tunes, because I really didn't care. It was a jam band to me. You know, I had other things to do. So I didn't really participate in a lot of that stuff. But on the other hand, you know, if there's a song I wanted to do, we said, oh, okay, we said, let's try it. And, you know, not a problem. The thing is, we had such a different, you know, Merle was like, had a reputation as a jazz player. Jerry had his thing. I had my thing, was kind of a mixed jazz R&B, and John Kahn his experience was mostly blues and R&B. So there were all these different things that were blending together, you know, rock and roll and Motown, and, you know, we did Stevie Wonder tunes, we did Bob Dylan tunes, all different kinds of things. So that was, I think a lot of people liked that, you know, it wasn't just one area.
Yeah, you were doing. I mean, you were doing Dylan tunes, Wonder tunes. You also did a lot of reggae, like Jimmy Cliff tunes, and
right.
And it was, you know, it seemed listening back. It's just funny. I was hoping I was not going to allow this to pass, but I was hoping you could also just talk a little bit about John Kahn. I know you were very close with John, and to me, to a lot of people who you know, I was born in 1978. I never even saw the Grateful Dead. I never saw Jerry Garcia Band. So I'm living through these fantasies, and he always strikes me as a real character. But you know, there's no interviews out there with him. There's no audio aside from his great playing, and I just was hoping you could just spend a couple minutes talking about your buddy John Kahn.
Okay, before I get there, one more thing about the different kinds of music.
Go right ahead.
Then we'd throw in a song like "My Funny Valentine" and do it jazz style. See, and you know, that was how diverse our tunes were. But anyway, on to John Kahn. When I met John, he was married, and he had a kid, and like I had said before, we both lived in Forest Knolls, and he was from L.A., and he had a pretty good reputation, you know, in the blues world and all that. And so anyway, I don't know, he was actually, he loved jazz, he loved blues, R&B, and all that. And he also played a little bit of piano, and he was, you know, a real musician. He was, like, really into it. So that we had in common, and we just ended up, you know, we were together all the time. We were working together. So I don't know how to explain it. He's a pretty laid-back guy, you know. He's actually very laid-back. So, you know, and I'm very laid-back. He and I could be driving to a gig and not say a word. You know?
That's okay. So you guys were there was, but it wasn't uptight at all. So I mean, the creative expression, it was just a very relaxed atmosphere. I mean, it wasn't like you were trying to. There was no power struggles going on.
No. And you know, we had our ups and downs, but most part we got along well. In fact, we had years after I left the band, we got together. I was living in Sebastopol at the time, and invited he and his girlfriend over for dinner and hung out. And that's the last time I saw him. And but anyway, he was just a buddy, you know, and we worked together, and you know.
When Bill, just take a few more minutes here. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I wanted to ask you, after 75, paint the picture a little bit, mid to late 70s, even into the early 80s. Who were you gigging with, and were you on albums? And because it's very hard to dig some of this stuff up, and I'd like you to paint that picture for us.
Well, actually, I retired 4 times.
You did? Okay, 4.
And I
wish I could do that.
I moved up to the Healdsburg area, in the 70s. Actually, I moved to Sebastopol first and then to Healdsburg. And I just didn't want anything to do with music. Buddy and I bought a little old winery that had been dormant for many years. So I got into winemaking, making wine, and then I got to play more music. So I put together a band called Mirage. It was a 7-piece R&B jazz
Wow.
Latin band.
What year was that?
Oh, God, that was in the 80s. Phil Wood was in the band. Jimmy Strasberg that played with Sly and a lot of other people. And, you know, I had different players at different times, but it was a real good band. We played the Cabaret in at the beginning, places like that.
Sure.
You know, the usual stuff that bands did back then. And then that band broke up, and I did take a gig in New Orleans for 3.5 months with a really good band. In fact, Nick Daniels, the bass player that used to play with the Neville Brothers, was in the band. Ivan Neville played with us a lot, and, you know, the real New Orleans people. And but other than that, I just kind of stopped, and then I moved to New Mexico in '06, bought a house there and fixed it up, and then a year and a half ago I decided that I got to get back to the music thing. I did work on my piano stuff when I was there, and I played with a couple cover bands just to keep my chops up on keyboard. But then I decided I'm going to move back here and go full tilt, and that's what I've been doing. And can I talk about my CD?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah, please.
Okay. The last CD I did was called State of Grace. You can find that on CD, baby. In fact, Tony Saunders is playing a couple of cuts on that, and I did most of it on Send. But I've got another one that in 3 weeks I'm going back to LA, and I've just got a couple more tunes I got to put together, but I've almost got everything ready. And I was hanging out with Bill Chaplin a few weeks ago, and if he's in town, he's going to help me with the project and probably sing on part or maybe all the vocals. And Tony Saunders said, just call me and I'll be down there in a New York minute. So I'll have Tony on bass, and another buddy of mine down there is a great guitar player and a great studio, great engineer, and the guy that co-produced my last one will be working with me again, which we worked very well together. So anyway, I'll have a real nice product out. We'll probably finish in a couple of months, but
Are you gonna play piano or drums on that?
I'll play both, and then I do a lot of the parts on the synthesizer. So.
And do we have a name? Do we have a name on that album yet?
No.
Well, let me know when you do, and Bill will be sure to I'll give it some good airplay on my radio show, the Jake Feinberg Show, 13:30 a.m. and just be great to have you. I mean, are you thinking that you play live a lot anymore or?
Oh yeah, I'm doing. I'm playing jazz gigs on drums. Judy Hall, I play with her a lot, and Mitch Stein and Tony Saunders. We have a little trio that we play some gigs.
Where do you got what venues?
It depends. Anything we can get.
Well, believe me, if I can find you guys a spot, if I can get you down here to the Westward Look or do some sort of jazz session down here, I'd get you down here in a New York minute. I would.
Yeah, but the thing with Mitch, I don't know if you know Mitch. He's a great pianist, great musician.
What's his name?
And then Mitch Stein.
Yeah, I know the name, but I don't know him.
Yeah.
Who's playing? Yeah.
He's played with everybody. He's a heavy, but he and I and Tony really clicked together, and it's just a trio, but it's pretty hot, especially with Tony on bass. It's just solid as a rock, But that's the main thing that I'd like to do. And then I play with another band where I play B3 and sing, and it's a good band to practice my tunes, and we get together at least once a week out here in the Valley in Woodacre. So
what's the name of that band?
It really doesn't even have a name. It's kind of like Garcia Band. We just get together and jam. We play a few gigs.
No wonder you can't find it on the internet then.
Well, the name, one of the guys that jams with a lot is Walt Dixon, and he has a band called Sky Blue that really good band actually, but he always plays guitar with us. And, a lot of the really good local musicians. So I have a place I can go have a band play my tunes and work on them, which is really nice. And I live
Bill, listen, we did the early set, and we're going to take a long intermission, but maybe as I continue to on this journey along, we can come back and if I continue to paint this picture of an important period in our history that not only did you live through, but you actually helped to mold. So I can't thank you enough for being part of my program.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Take it easy.
Okay, thank you.
All right now.